Welcome on in, everybody. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 live stream going over PGA DFS and, of course, props for Sunday at the Honda. Excited to bring you guys a preview for tomorrow so we can go out there, cash out, whether it's for those DFS lineups or those props. And excited to have you guys down there in chat as well. So welcome on in, everybody. Hopefully, you're having a solid start to your weekend. In general, Saturday was an average day, I would say. From the Showdown side was a slight profiter, and then on the prop side, a slight loser. We had like 4 or 5 props hook. Luckily, I couldn't really track out there in the course because when I ended up getting into the Uber, getting some Wi-Fi, able to check the board, we got hooked just all over the place. So I was annoyed by that, but sometimes that's just how prop betting is going to go. But on the Showdown side, was able to make up for it a little bit. So like I said, about an average day, but I'm hoping to end this week and, of course, watching it in person too with a fun day, but more importantly, to go out there and kind of make up for that bankroll. So looking forward to it. We got the API next week, Players Championship the next week. I'll be at both of those events too. So just a great time of the year. So Todd says, are you going to hammer Lowry outright? Probably not. I think if you're trying to bet him now, right after 3 rounds, probably not the best time to hop on. The value's gone. You're getting juiced by the sports books. So personally, probably not going to get there, Todd, but I do think he's got a good chance of winning. So we'll talk through potential winners, a few spots in terms of outright odds that you might want to target. But yeah, Lowry, just based on his current odds, probably not one of those players. But let's go ahead, bring up the golf course, get this thing started. Again, welcome in, everybody. Hopefully you're having a solid start to your day. And in terms of your round 3 scoring, it played slightly easier than I think I would have imagined. Of course, for round 2, played easier than round 1 with the low winds. But based on some of the easier pin locations, like we saw there in 18, right, played a whole half a stroke under par. And then hole number 3 also played a little bit easier than I was expecting. So I thought the scoring average might be closer to like even par or slightly over par. These players, especially in the morning wave, were able to take advantage. So when you take a look at the scoring, you see in the morning it played 1.13 shots under par, whereas in the afternoon it played just a third of a stroke under. So that was about a 0.8 shot difference. Closer to what we saw there on Monday, right? It was a 1.2 shot difference. Yesterday, it was a 1.8 shot difference between the waves. But here on Saturday, the lowest out of the 3 days, just about a 0.8 shot difference. So I think the reason for that would be talent level, right? The guys at the top of the board were the guys teeing off later today. So you would expect a lot of those guys that are quote unquote in form, right, to play a little bit stouter than the guys at the bottom of the board. So perhaps that's why you saw that little edge there. But here for Sunday, as these greens are getting slightly crunchier as the week goes on, I think, as I've said multiple times throughout this week, that effect is just only going to continue. So expect to see that edge there for Sunday, right? You've seen it the first 3 days, albeit a little bit smaller here on Saturday. Again, it was only a 0.8 shot difference. But if you told me before the round that there was going to be a 0.8 shot difference between the 2 waves, then obviously you would hammer the AM wave, right? Now here for Sunday, one thing that I think may help the AM players' case might be those Sunday nerves, right? Those guys that are at the top of the board. I mean, outside of Lowry, even Chris Kirk, right, is going to be nervous out of his mind as that overnight leader. Ben Eric Cole, Justin Suh haven't really been in contention on a Sunday before. Ben Taylor, right now, he's been decent this year, but definitely not used to the spotlight. Even Benny Ann hasn't been here very often, at least over the last year or so. Tyler Duncan, Sepp Straka. Now you're starting to get to like the chaser range down here. Which is really what I'm trying to target. So at the top of the board, some of these young players, even a Chris Kirk, Shane Lowry, I think you're a little bit late to the party if you're trying to ride them here on Sunday. Now, if you already have an outright on Lowry, then congrats. I think you're at a great spot. He's the likely winner here. And even Chris Kirk there at minus 13, you can see Data Golf has him at a 53% chance of winning. This is drastically off. I just have to tell you, if any sportsbook has Chris Kirk at minus money, they're completely full of it. The Honda Classic, one of the more volatile events on tour. For Chris Kirk to shoot 1-2 over par tomorrow wouldn't even be the slightest bit surprising in considering that there's players within 4 shots of him. I mean, just look at Daniel Berger last year, right? Was 5 shots ahead of Sepp Straka. Didn't even play all that poorly on Sunday, but because Sepp was able to get it under par and then Daniel Berger was a few strokes over, that a lead completely evaporated. So Chris Kirk there at a 53.6% chance of winning. I just have to see data golf. I vehemently disagree with that take there. And in general, when we get over here to the showdown board in a second, you want to embrace that volatility, right? We know that it's going to be more difficult in the afternoon, right? So if you sort this by score, Ryan Brem was a relatively early tee time. There were a few exceptions, most notably Shane Lowry, Chris Kirk, and Eric Cole. All three players that were teeing off in the last like 4 to 5 groups ended up having solid days. But a majority of these top end rounds, right? Brem, right, -6, your best round, ended up playing in one of the first groups of the day. Kramer Hickok went off relatively early. Ben Griffin, same thing. Robbie Schoen, Kevin Roy. Down here, guys like Garrett Higo, right? He was going nuclear through his first 9 holes. I believe what was he like? He shot a 29 on the first 9, which I believe is 6 under par, right? Something like that for Garrett Higo. So the guys that were going off early clearly had an advantage today, but the equalizer, right? Kind of like I mentioned just a little bit ago, is the talent gap, right? The guys at the top of the board are not only just better players, but they're also in form. So that effect is why you only saw a 0.8 shot difference. It'll probably be something similar there for Sunday. Perhaps the nerves will make it closer to like a 0.9 or even a whole stroke difference between the two waves. But I don't expect to see this 1.8 shot difference again, right? What we saw over there for Friday's round was about as extreme as it's going to get, particularly when we take a look at the weather for Sunday, and it's looking like it's going to be calm. In the morning, you have next to no wind between 3 to 5 miles an hour. In fact, between 11 to noon, right between 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., you have next to no wind. In fact, 0 miles an hour on the docket there at 12, and a little bit of a wind direction change, which you don't see all that often on tour. You can see in the morning, it's going to be going northeast, and then in the afternoon, it's going to be going dead west, which this west wind direction is what we're used to seeing. It's what you see most of the day on Saturday. On Thursday, Friday, the wind was going, I believe, northwest for most of the day. So the early morning, you're going to see a completely opposite wind direction, though it's hardly going to be blowing, right? So if you're expecting these players to get help down a few holes that they weren't really getting it before on, I would kind of guard against that, right? It's going to be like a 3 to 5 miles an hour wind. But most importantly, when it's going to change directions, right, which is going to be right around noon, there's literally no wind. So the guys that are going off early, that are going to have pristine greens, that are going to have the most receptive greens because it's going to be a little bit more humid in the morning, are also going to be finishing their round of the bear trap when there's going to be 0 wind, right? And the reason why I can tell you there's going to be 0 wind and why they're projecting for 0 wind there is kind of like with the tides, right? When the tides are coming in and out, right, it's going to be rising for, let's say, 2-3 hours. And then for about 30 minutes to an hour, right, it's going to be slack tide where there's going to be essentially no movement. That's what you're looking at there, right? A lot of these winds, especially on a coastal track like Florida, are completely tied to the tides. Excuse my pun there, of course, but that's how they're tracking this. That's how they're modeling this wind here. And it's not just over here on Windfinder. It's also reflected in other sites. So let's look over here in Willy Weather. You can see in the morning, they have it closer to like 5.8 miles an hour, closer to midday, going a little bit lower, right? Closer to 4 miles an hour, and then picking up ever so slightly in the afternoon. And you can see the same little correlation with the wind directions happens, right? Right around midday, right around 2 p.m. So they have it happening a little bit later than over there on Windfinder. The wind changes direction. So either way, I think that the guys that are playing the bear trap in the morning are going to be at a huge advantage because tomorrow, unlike the first 3 days, the bear trap could potentially play all downwind. So if you're one of the players that's going off at 6:50 a.m., that's the first tee time tomorrow, you could be playing holes 15 through 17 downwind for the first time, which is a huge advantage, like I said. You would also be playing holes 5 and 7 with a little bit less of a penalty there too. And those are 2 of the most difficult par 3s on property. Whereas the afternoon guys, you can see you get back to that normal wind direction by right around 2 p.m. Eastern time. Over here on Willy Weather, they're calling for the same thing, right? Right around 2 p.m. Eastern time is when you're seeing that wind change directions. So the guys that are, let's say, middle of the pack or better, are going to be playing in that bear trap, which of course today maybe played a little bit easier than what you've seen most days. You can see over here 15, 16, and 17. 16 was hardly over par. 17 wasn't that much over par. This, you can see in the afternoon, right, played a whole half shot over par. It's all because of the double bogeys. You can see over there on the right, there were 8 double bogeys in the PM wave. So that's a little bit of an outlier. But you can see day one, right, all 3 holes played difficult. Day 2, pretty much all 3 played difficult, right? 15 played slightly under par. But today, 16 and 17 were slightly easier. So part of that was due to the, winds being a little bit lower. But tomorrow, with them playing downwind, they're going to play even easier than that. So if you're trying to fade par 3 strokes, that sort of thing, even with a few tough pin locations, which we have here in the par 3s. So you have holes 5 and 7. So 5 is a front middle pin. It is relatively protected from the water. So that's actually an easy pin. Hole 7's a front pin. I'd also classify that as easy. Now 15's in the back middle. So that's also away from the water, which again is kind of like the ideal situation for these par 3s. 17's the only tough one, right? Back like middle right is how I describe the pin location. Does bring in a lot of the water to the right side, which off screen, you can't really see it there. There is an entire canal that continues the whole way around the hole there. But 5, 7, and 15, right, are all significantly easier than what we've seen. So that's a little bit of a change, I would say. I mean, typically the Sunday pins at this Honda tend to be some of the most difficult that you'll see. But, number 1 is tucked 3 paces from the side. Almost every pin is tucked at least, at the very most, 6 paces from the side. 10 looks a little bit easier, but again, that's a 500-yard par 4. So it's not like players are going to be taking advantage of that. It's looking like your normal Sunday, right? 18, this back middle pin tends to be one of the harder pins at 18. Let's see, hole number 3 is another par 5. It's a middle front pin. It looks balanced. It looks like a course where you're going to have a few birdie holes, like most notably, right, 3. A few of the par 3s are going to be gettable there tomorrow. But then you have holes like, right, 17 that are going to be next to impossible. There are a few others. 11 is an extremely difficult pin. The front pin just over the canal, and that's like a 170-yard approach shot. Is one of the most difficult on tour. 6 is a really tricky pin. It's a cut relatively close to the water there too. It's looking like it's going to be an entertaining round. There's going to be birdies to be had. If you're on your game, you could shoot something like 4 to 5 under par tomorrow. But if you're off your game, you could be shooting that 4 to 5 over score. So Chris Kirk, just because he's there in the lead, again, if we sort this by score, you can see he's got a 53% chance of winning. That's why I'm not so confident in that, right? That's why I think that guys like a Kirk, a Cole, a Lowry aren't nearly the for sure prospects that a lot of people are making them out to be. So I would just kind of heavily guard against that. It's worth looking at the windy app here. You can see the wind direction also changing directions between that 11 to 2 p.m. window. They have it changing directions. So similar to the other 2 sites. And in terms of your wind gusts, they have slightly higher winds projected in the morning, which is a little bit different than the other 2 sites, but relatively consistent conditions throughout the afternoon. So maybe they're just maybe over projecting the morning wave there tomorrow there on the windy app. But I feel like we have a pretty good idea of what to expect, right? Winds are going to be relatively low like we had here for Friday's round. The morning wave should have the easier conditions because of the receptive greens, the pristine greens over there at PGA National. So we're going to want to target those guys, particularly over there for Showdown right today. I didn't even have a Shane Lowry in my lineups. I also didn't have a Ryan Brem or an Eric Cole, and I still ended up going 2.5x, making a bunch of money over there for the Showdown side, just because I was taking the guys with a 0.8 shot advantage. And again, with those Sunday nerves, maybe it's closer to a stroke difference here on Sunday, which would lead to an even better ROI. So let's go ahead, hop over to the DFS side. If you guys are new here, we go through the golf course first, which we just finished up. We go through our DFS picks, and then at the end, we go through our top props. So just to give you an idea of when to expect everything to drop. Let's see what's going on down there in chat. Colin said you made so many crazy lineups that had too much Cam Davis. The guy killed you. So yeah, you're talking about for 4-round lineups. Yeah, I have a few decent 6 of 6s, but at this point, and I was showing this to a few of my buddies, my top 5 lineups out of my 150 for main slate all have SH Kim. So SH Kim is 1 over par. He's in like 50th place, actually a little bit worse than that at this point. And all of my top lineups, and again, I play 150, right? So I get a bunch of different combinations, all have him, right? Of all things, right? And the thing is, the rest of the lineup is absolute bangers. It's like Chris Kirk. I have a bunch of Eric Cole, right? Talked him up this week. Benny Ann, who's up there in the top 5. I even played guys like Tyler Duncan and who else is, sorry, let's look at the board. Bryce Garnett. I freaking played at -7 this week. So I have all of these players in the top 5. And because I mixed them with SH Kim, it's looking like it's going to be a no dud for me. So yeah, sometimes it's like that, Colin. I definitely played some Cam Davis this week myself. He ended up missing there in 18, which was a little bit annoying. He had a 11-foot birdie putt to go out there and inevitably go out there and make the cut. And he lifted out. So that sucked. The outright on Billy not looking good. Yeah, dude. I mean, people go out there and bet like 8 to 10 outrights a week. So if one of my 4 outrights isn't looking good, I mean, what do you expect? There's 144 players. So I don't know if you're just trolling, if you're new to betting, that sort of thing, bro. I mean, like every week, most of, if not all of your outrights are going to look pretty shitty. So I don't know. I'll just throw that back at you. You must be new at betting. It's all right, Todd. You'll get it eventually. Sack says, who do you think can win tomorrow? There's a bunch of guys that can win. I would say the cutoff line is probably -6. I think from -6 and up, all of those players are more than live, particularly if somebody like Chris Kirk were to struggle. Now, if Chris Kirk goes out there, shoots 2 under par, right, gets his job done, you're looking at a much smaller list of players. You're looking at like maybe Justin Suh having a chance. The guys there at like 7, 8 under par are going to have to go out there and go nuclear to win. A lot of it comes down to Chris Kirk, right? Because he has that large lead. But over the years, we've seen guys like Daniel Berger choke. Even the year that Sanjay won, you had a few guys choke at the top of the board. It's kind of the regular at this point. Mark says, who are you avoiding tomorrow? It'd be the chalky players. So great little segue here, Mark. Appreciate it. Little professional transition here. It'd be guys like Shane Lowry, right? Chris Kirk. And now we got to talk about why, right? Because there's going to be people that are new to DFS down there that maybe don't understand why you'd be avoiding the guys in first place. It's because it depends on what contest you're entering, right? If you're in a cash contest, a single entry, maybe it's a 2 to 3 max contest, I'm fine with playing Shane Lowry. Now, Chris Kirk, because of the ownership, because he's a lower tier player than somebody like a Shane Lowry, I'd probably be avoiding him no matter the contest that you're playing in. But if you're playing in, you know, a 50-50 contest, one of those smaller field events, I don't mind a Shane Lowry, right? But what this stream is kind of catered towards, what pretty much all the analysis that I'm giving you is through a lens of, is a GPP kind of mindset, right? Playing against 7,000, 8,000 other people. Maybe it's 10, 15,000 other entries. But in either circumstance, you know, he's going to be 40% plus owned. So if you're playing it, you know, against a large net of people, like you would be in one of those contests, you would be an absolute fool, right, to not play the ownership game, to go out there and take the game theory approach. And the thing is, in single entries 2 to 3 maxes, he's going to be higher owned, right? He might be 50, 60% owned in those sort of contests. I'd be more willing to play him there because you're not playing against 10,000 other people, right? You don't need the absolute perfect lineup to win. And the reason why you try and fade those players in the large contest is even if they win, let's say that Shane Lowry has a decent day tomorrow, takes the championship from Chris Kirk, he's still going to have to shoot probably 5 under par to get into the optimal. And today, right, if we go back over there to the top scores, you had, let's see, like 15 players that shot -4 or better. Now, I think -5 might have been pushing that there a little bit. He's got to shoot at least -4, right, and win the golf tournament to get to that optimal. And while Shane Lowry, more than capable of doing so, do we think he's going to do it 100% of the time, right? Because if he's going to be 40% owned, maybe 50, 60% owned in those single entries of 2 to 3 maxes, you essentially have to play him in every single lineup to get leverage to the foot, or at least that ideal leverage mark that most people are looking for, right? That 2x leverage mark. So that's why I would say like maybe Shane Lowry, right? Guys like a Chris Kirk that are going to be about 40% owned. I don't know, like Benny Ann, you could put into that conversation, even a Justin Suh. Guys like Sepp Straka are going to get ownership. Ben Taylor, Eric Cole especially, they're at $7,800. All of those players you should consider fading, but I don't think you have to fade all of them. Out of those 5 or 6 guys, you could probably fit 1 or 2 into your player pool. But if you're taking 4 or 5 out of those 6, you're going to be taking just way too much chalk. And unless you're setting specific rules in your optimizer to avoid playing more than two together, you could really be walking into a lot of duplicates and lack of leverage in those, 7,000 to 15,000 entry contests. So that's the lens that we're looking through, right? We're looking through it in that large field mindset. And in those contests, I'd be avoiding the super mega chalk players. So I know you're down there in the Patreon, you have access to the ownership. I would say that anybody that's 20% owned plus for tomorrow, you would have to be enamored with, right? You'd have to love the stats, you'd have to love the course fit, so on and so forth, to go out there and want to play them in bulk. And if it's going to be a 40% owned number like you have there in a Shane Lowry or a Chris Kirk, then you probably want to especially so consider those fades. So in that 10K range, there's going to be a bunch of chalk. I think there's going to be people that take Shane Lowry and Chris Kirk together. So even if you try and take that combination, right, to try and get a little bit different to the field, I'm not sure how much leverage that's going to get you. So I would say that, man. Bramlett killed you. Goes from the top to the bottom real quick. Yeah, I was on the other side. I wasn't actively rooting against Bramlett, but yeah, tough to see. I mean, he's a good kid. Everything I've seen from him looks like he's got his head in the right space. You've got a single outright at $50 on Shane Lowry. You hope he wins. That'd be pretty sweet. What is he, 50 to 1? He was like 10 to 1 pre-week. Nice little $500 payout. Maybe you got him at better odds. In fact, I think you said you got him at 20 to 1, if I remember correctly in the Discord. So little $1,000 outright. So hey, if he ends up winning for you, I'll be happy. But at least in terms of my personal exposure, a few other guys I would rather have win. But it doesn't look like I'm going to have an outright this week. Like Billy Ho's a little bit too far back, like Todd was saying a little bit earlier. But I don't know. In terms of DFS, like Chris Kirk winning wouldn't be a horrible thing. But for Showdown, maybe not ideal. Lowry's in your main group for tomorrow, Cole. Yeah, so those two players, I mean, if you're going to play them, right, and if you're going to play them together, right, this would be even more important. You're going to have to differentiate like crazy. I mean, if you even take like a guy like 40% owned Shane Lowry, even like a 25% owned Eric Cole, you're going to have to mix in at least two players below 5%. I mean, that would be my recommendation, just to make sure that your product ownership is going to be low enough in those large field contests. But if you're in a single entry, right, I don't know, right, you can play both of them together, right, a Shane Lowry and an Eric Cole. Just also make sure to take those two low end pivots. But now, if you were in a large field GPP and you were taking those two together, you might have to take all four pivots, right? The rest of your lineup may have to be all guys that are going to be like sub 7 to 8% owned. So it kind of depends on what contest you're in, Mark. But, assuming that you're in a large field GPP, right, like we're doing for most of the analysis here on the stream, just mix in a few pivots, right? I'm okay with playing them. Even if it's both of them. You're saying Lowry in your main slate. Gotcha. So you're just talking about Cole on his own. Yeah, Cole on his own, you can play him all you want. Like I said, with Shane Lowry, just like mix in somebody that's going to get you that leverage, and I have no problem with it. And, knowing you, Mark, right, you're a sharp player that's doing your analysis. Just take one guy there in the 7K range that's going to be, I don't know, like 6, maybe 7% owned at the very max, and you'll be good to go. Yeah, no problems with that at all. Let's go ahead and talk through this top of the board. Like I said, Shane Lowry, Chris Kirk are getting all the ownership. If you're looking for pivots, Minwoo Lee going to be essentially unowned, and Aaron Wise is going to be sub 5% owned. So if you're looking to take somebody to just instantly differentiate yourself, maybe if you're taking a Lowry or a Chris Kirk up top, all of those players are options. Sungjae Im, you're finally going to get him at a reasonable ownership number. I have him at sub 25% right now, which is about half the ownership that he was for the last 2 days. So like I said, even yesterday, right, that was when I ended up buying in on a Sungjae Im. Obviously didn't time that my best, wasn't the best play there for Showdown, that's for sure, right? Only shot 1 under par. But here for Sunday Showdown, you'd kind of be remiss not to go back to him, right? He's the best player in the field. I mean, objectively, pretty much no matter what metric you're looking at, he's at least top 5 in this field, has the elite course history, and the ball striking to this point hasn't been all that poor. In fact, just bringing up the stats from today, let me go ahead and bring up the PGA Tour sites, give you guys the exact ball striking numbers. It was more than serviceable. It just wasn't flashy, right? That's why I didn't go out there and shoot something super mega low. So Sungjae Im ended up with an even par round today. And in round 3, was able to gain strokes off the tee, about a stroke, and gained over a stroke and a half on approach. just lost strokes around the green and nearly lost 3 strokes putting. So just had birdie look after birdie look. I had his birdie or better line over there on Prize Picks, which was a little bit tilting considering he only got to 2 birdies, but he gave himself all the opportunities in the world, right? Whether the flat stick was cold, whether it was just blind luck, right? Putts hitting a dimple or going the wrong direction, lipping out. It's really hard to say, right? That's why golf is such a great sport, right? It's so volatile. Pretty much anything can happen. And, when we look at the ball striking numbers, he did everything he could, right? He gave himself birdie look after birdie look, like I was saying. And for Sunday Showdown, just to remind you guys, there are placement points in play, right? So unlike the last 2 streams that we've done for Friday and Saturday, where placement points haven't been a part of the picture, they're a huge part here, right? Even without those placement points, if Sungjae Im goes out there and shoots 5 under par, he's going to be the guy you have to have in the optimal, right? If Shane Lowry shoots 3, maybe even 4 under par and wins this golf tournament, there's no guarantee that he's in that optimal, right? Those birdie streaks that you can get that are also important when it comes to Showdown, those bogey-free rounds that you might see from a few of the guys going off early could be the difference on who wins all the money. Now, if you're playing in a single entry, a 2 to 3 max, I'm perfectly fine with Shane Lowry and Kirk. Not only are they getting placement points, which are going to make them just slightly higher projected plays when it comes to their median projection, but they're also playing the best golf, right? So when we're trying to evaluate a player, look at who's going to be the most likely to go out there and play well tomorrow, you would have to look at a Lowry or a Kirk. So depending on what kind of contest I'm entering, I might consider guys like a Lowry or a Kirk. But even if you're playing in a single entry 2 to 3 max, don't think you have to play one of those guys, right? If you get to a Sungjae Im, a Minwoo Lee, they're going to be even more so pivots. Like Sungjae Im, I would imagine its single entries would be like 20% owned minus, like maybe even below 15%. Minwoo Lee, I have him at right around like 7 to 8% ownership for this big field contests, but for single entries, he might be sub 5%. So just because you can play, right, a Shane Lowry and a Chris Kirk in those contests, doesn't mean you have to, right? If you want to try and get that leverage, you're going to have even more an ability to do so, and it's going to be even more effective if it ends up paying off. In this 9K range, there's not a ton of chalk. I would say that Sepp Straka is going to be by far your highest owned player, but based on his track record, how he's hit it over the first 3 rounds, I don't think he's somebody you just have to avoid based on his ownership. And just to give you an idea of how he's hitting it, to show you why I think he's one of those high-owned players that you might not want to fade, is in round 3, he gained off the tee and on approach. In round 2, he gained off the tee and on approach. And in round 1, you guessed it, he gained off the tee and on approach. And over the first 3 rounds, he's top 16 in the field off the tee, and he's top 8 in the field when it comes to his approach play. So you're talking about somebody who, from the ball striking perspective, at least, do they have a shots gained ball striking metric on here? They don't. Is at the very worst top 4 in the field. And that is by far the most consistent stat from week to week. The stat that's the most sticky, right? Even from round to round. So for Sepp Straka, who to this point, I mean, even today, right, he lost, well, actually he gained strokes putting. That's why he had the round that he did, but he lost strokes putting in round 2 and in round 1. If he can string together another solid putting round, then it could be another 4 or 5 under par round. So Sepp Straka may be the one piece of chalk that I'm buying in on, because he's going to be a little bit lower owned than the quote unquote other pieces of chalk. And he's really the only guy here in that lower 9K, top of the 8K range that is kind of bringing you that placement point upside. So if anyone's going to be chalking, you take them. I think it's one of those players. But like up top, you have guys like Sungjae Im that are like, again, the best player in the field, right, that you can pivot to, or Minwoo Lee, that's an absolute madman who we've seen over there on the European Tour, even on the PGA Tour, from time to time, make 7-8 birdies in a single round. I mean, sometimes at relatively difficult golf courses. So just consider ownership. It's not the end all be all, like I said, but, especially when you're getting like a sub 15% owned Sungjae or a sub 5% Minwoo Lee, it's just a little bit too tempting to pass up. Let's go ahead, catch up on chat, see what's going on. Video Games, his thoughts on Akshay. Yeah, I had a rough day today. Let's look at the stats. I actually don't know what the stats look like for Akshay. I know he played well over par. Was over there at 17, was still, upbeat, again with the crowd. So you like to see that. But he lost off the tee and lost an approach. He lost across all 4 categories. So, sometimes in golf, you just wake up, you don't have your game. Pretty much nothing's working for you. That's kind of what it looks like for Akshay. He lost almost 5 strokes total to the field there. And for Sunday Showdown, going to be going off early. I mentioned before that I think that the guys going off in the first half of tee times are going to be at a significant advantage as compared to the guys going off a little bit later on. And he likes the course. He's been very vocal about that this week. Yeah, I like Akshay Bhatia. I think as a guy that you're taking at a relatively low ownership, decent price tag too. Let's look at it, right? He's $7,400. Completely understand the play. In fact, I'll be there as well. Eric says, do you think Webb has found his game? It's interesting. He looked like it today. He didn't look like it in round 1, so he's been a little bit hit or miss. Let's take a look at the shots gained, which tend to be the most telling stat in terms of a player's form. So today, he gained slightly off the tee, gained slightly on approach, but gained 3 strokes putting, or just nearly 3 strokes putting, which was number 1 in the field. So I would be a little bit hesitant to say that he's found his game. Rounds 1 and 2, he wasn't a huge gainer off the tee or on approach. And in round 1, he was a little bit more of a significant gainer, both off the tee and on approach, but he lost 2.5 strokes putting that day. So it just seems a little bit difficult for Webb to put his entire game together. So I just want to see it a little bit more often. The players, the API should be relatively decent courses for Webb Simpson. And if he can go out there and, finish in, let's say, like the top 15 or something like that, maybe we're on to something. But I think it's a little bit early to say that. Sammy says, Kirk came in clutch for a hole 18 for birdie better matchup. Yeah, didn't come in clutch, though, on a hole 17. He ended up making a birdie putt from like 25 feet. In fact, it was actually one of the last few holes that I watched before I ended up leaving, and screwed a lot of people for par 3 strokes, including myself. So that kind of sucked. Are you in a luxury box of the tournament? Corp setup. I heard you say you paid $45 for a glass of champagne. Yeah, so it's not a corporate box. My mom, the CEOs, the financial officers for some of the hospitals or some of the different organizations that are named sponsors, are up in the corporate boxes. I do have free tickets to an all-inclusive package. The champagne, though, is there's only like one little suite on the entire course where they sell champagne, and it's called like the Tanger's tent, which is like a medium to upscale champagne. It's like, I don't know, it's like $100 champagne. So it's nothing crazy. But on the course, they were charging like $1,000 for a bottle. So they were taxing beyond belief. And I don't know. My mom wanted some champagne, and she didn't care if she had to pay on top of her all-inclusive package. So we took advantage. And hey, I even ended up going out there and buying a glass for myself. It is what it is. It's going to be expensive out there. So it's not something I care about all that much. Let's go ahead, continue through this player pool here. We're going to go through some of the guys in the 8K range to consider. But like I said, we're just looking for ownership pivots, right? We're looking for players that are going off early, ideally, right? They're going to have the best conditions and that can move themselves up the leaderboard. Because if you haven't, kind of gotten this vibe to this point, these placement points for first place might not matter, right? Chris Kirk might shoot even par, win this golf tournament, and be far outside the optimal because you're only getting 12 points for finishing in first place, which is essentially 2 birdies. So if you have players in the field that are making 6, 7 birdies like you've had over the first 3 days, and considering the wind conditions, you're likely to see that again, even with some difficult pin locations. Again, there's a few easy pin locations too, right? I tried to point that out before. For as hard as a few of them are, there's also a few that are almost cupcakes out there. So Chris Kirk, even if he wins, he might not be in that optimal. So just consider the fades. Same thing goes for Justin Suh, right? He might shoot -2, end up winning the golf tournament, and might not end up cracking the optimal. Now, if Justin Suh $8,200 wins the golf tournament, I'd say he's a lot more likely to make the optimal just based on the price tag. But still, he's going to have to go out there and play a solid round to make his way into the optimal. He's just not going to be handed those placement points like so many people think. Same thing with Eric Cole. In terms of pivots, guys like a Will Gordon that have a ton of upside are worth getting to. Now, today, he did not have his best stuff. He went out there, I believe, shot 1 under par. He's one of the more volatile players that we have on tour. But if you look at players that gain over 5 strokes gained in a single round, he's up there with a John Rahm, a Justin Thomas in that category, despite not being an elite level player, right? So what that tells you is that when Will Gordon has his best stuff, he's capable of playing like one of those elite tier players. So for a single round sample size at low ownership, those are the kind of guys I'm considering. Brandon Wu checks that box. Even SH Kim, that was horrible today. I'd be willing to go back to. Again, it's just a single round sample, right? Just because he has a shitty Saturday does not mean he's going to go out there tomorrow and play shitty. And sure, there's going to be correlation from somebody's performance from round to round, but it's not like you're reading the encyclopedia, right? It's not like you're going out there and being told the stone cold nuts. Guys like SH Kim, who I have at like sub 4% ownership at this point, are just very easy sources of leverage to play to differentiate yourself. If you're taking some of that chalk up top, it'd have just as much, if not more, upside than the guys at the top of the board. Because you got to remember, like Eric Cole here, right? While I think his placement points are evident, even like a Ben Taylor, right, has a lot of potential to get those, 5, 6, even those 8 or 12 placement points for the guys there in the top 5. The issue is they don't need to be as aggressive, and they know that, right? Like Eric Cole, Ben Taylor know if they go out there, they shoot 1-2 under par there tomorrow, they're going to finish in the top 3, the top 5, probably even the top 3, which in terms of their career arc, right, where they are in terms of professional golfers, is career altering, right? It's lifestyle changing for them to go out there and make $750,000 to $1 million. So expect to see guys like Eric Cole and Ben Taylor to take that seriously, to go out there and not take chances on those par 3s. And when we're playing Showdown, again, thinking through the large field GPP lens, we have to be looking for that upside. And if players are going to be a little bit safer towards the top of the board, that's just another reason to fade them. See, Sammy says, do you like Im having a good day with the earlier start? I do. He's also much lower owned. Video Game says, what early guys are you targeting going out early? So just went over a few of them, right? So like an SH Kim, Mo Gordon, a lot of the guys that are at -1 or worse are what you want to look at here. So down here in Akshay Bhatia, I know somebody asked a question about him. He's a great candidate. I would say Kevin Tway, he was a popular pick for 4-round contests this week. Hasn't really gotten it done to this point, but still made the cut. So clearly at least has, somewhat his game at this point. So, wouldn't surprise me if he went off there. Pearson Cootie, I'm going right back to it. I know he didn't have the best round from the score perspective, but still put up a ton of birdies on the scorecard. And on day 1, his 5 under par score shows you all the upside he has. Let's see. Like, I don't know, in the 6K range, you want to be a little bit more selective. So maybe like an MJ Daffy, he played decent today. Augusto Nunez, one of the better birdie makers on tour. Yeah, you're looking for like -1 or worse players. That's where the ownership is going to be low on some of those some of those guys, and guys that are aggressive. So just because they're playing shitty, right, doesn't mean you have to play them, right? Because there's a reason they're playing shitty, right? Maybe they don't have their swing. Maybe they were unlucky with the putter. Could have been a million different reasons. You want to make sure that there's still a reason to get there. So, Ben Griffin, for example, he's not at the bottom of the board, but I'm still playing him because he's got Benny Ann and Justin Suh around him, swallowing a ton of ownership. In fact, Ben Griffin, the lowest owned he has been the entire week here for Sunday Showdown. So just because somebody, is better than -4 doesn't mean I'm avoiding them. Like a Sepp Straka, I like his elite course history. I like how the fact that he's just been striping it over the first 3 rounds. Like, I'm still going to play a Sepp Straka for tomorrow, right? But, if I'm going to take somebody that's towards the middle to top of the board, that's going to have to play in the hardest conditions tomorrow, I'm thinking long and hard about it, right? I'm making sure that, they check enough boxes for me that I'm not just playing them because they're playing well, right? I'm playing them because the stats look good. They're a good course fit, whatever the reason may be, right? There's a rhyme and reason for me getting there. Let's see. All right, we're good on questions. Answer that for you, Video Games. But yeah, like I said, even for the guys at the middle of the board, there's still guys I'm getting to. So don't think that I'm only playing guys that are like -1 or worse. In this 8K range, I talked about Ben Griffin, Steven Yeager, probably worth a few looks. Joseph Bramlett, I'm a little bit concerned about the ball striking. So one of those pivots that I'm maybe a little bit less willing to get to. Towards the top of the 7K range, like Lee Hodges, you're looking at relatively low ownership. Matt Wallace is going to be chalky. Same thing with Eric Cole. Webb Simpson, if you want to get there, the ownership's not going to be crazy. I'm just a little bit worried about how he got it done. Again, gained almost 3 strokes with the putting today. Dylan Fratelli, on the other hand, is going to be much lower owned. Got it done in a more sustainable fashion today. We talked about Kevin Tway a little bit. Pearson Cootie, Those are a few little flyer plays that you could consider there. And in the 6K range, you're just looking for pure upside. Whether guys are hitting the ball well over the first 3 rounds, whether they're a high birdie percentage player like an Augusto Nunez here, you want to mix in a few guys, because if you do so, you can take a couple 10K options. If, you wanted to take a Sanjay and a Minwoo in the same lineup, well, you're going to have to take at least one 6K option, if not 2 of them. And there's enough names down here at the top, bottom end of the board to get that job done. So just to give you an idea, at like the pure minimum, like Brandon Matthews at $6,200, not the worst play. Local kid that played well over the first 2 days. Struggled a little bit on Saturday, but now we're getting a lower price and a lower ownership number. JB Holmes, he played well there on Friday. So another player who, now we're getting a lower price and ownership number on somebody that I think is a decent course fit. Nunez, like the birdie or better percentage. Daffy, right? Another aggressive player. Just you want to consider ownership down low even more. Like, let me just say, Cameron Percy, Ryan Gerard. Let me find more. Like Kevin Roy, even there at -4. Let's find Bryce Garnett, right there at -7, who I played for 400 contests. Even like Kramer Hickok, there at -5. Like, no, thank you. All of those players, like all like 5 or 6 of those guys, are going to be twice, if not 3 times higher owned than all of their peers. They're just clear fades. I mean, a lot of them, like even the guys at -7, right? If they go out there, shoot 2-3 under par, that doesn't guarantee them anything more than like maybe 4 or 5 placement points, which is about equivalent of 1 birdie there for a showdown round. So just a lot of people, especially the casuals that are playing PGA DFS here for Sunday, are going to overvalue that placement position, and it just makes it a clear spot that you can fade in GPPs and get that leverage too. So let's go ahead and catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. If not, we're going to hop into the player pool perspective. So Sammy has a question about props. We'll go ahead and take a look at that here in just a few minutes. In fact, the prop board didn't drop before I went live, so it's pretty sweet that they dropped it here while I'm live so we can touch on it. So we'll definitely do that after we go through DraftKings. Let me bring up DraftKings, a few contests, and let's talk through our cash build for tomorrow, and of course, a few considerations for making your showdown lineups for a main slate. So let me get a drink here. We've got a little bit of a Crown of Coke going. Out on the course, we were well lubricated, so tried to take a little bit of a break as we did our direct, projections there a little bit. But time to get the party started again. So let's see what we're doing here. If you have any DFS questions, feel free to go ahead and fire them away right now, so we can touch on them before we finish up the stream. Alrighty. Got our RSM Classic Cup here too, which if you went there on Friday for the RSM Classic this year, you didn't even have to pay for the thermos. They just gave them out for free. So good promotion, right? So now I have the RSM Classic logo on the cup there, but also it's like high quality thermos. So thoughts on them for sure. You weren't the designated driver. I was not. No. So the way we do it is if you're the designated driver one day, you are exempt the rest of the week. So we go out there, we do a random number generator. I was not in the polling today, luckily. Are you doing stars and scrubs? I am. So I'm trying to go out there and jam in, let's say like a Sanjay and a Minwoo to the same lineup. You're instantly forced down to 72.5 remaining. So you're, by default, almost going to be a studs and duds kind of approach. So, down towards the bottom, that's when I'm, considering like an Augusto Nunez, right, is in an aggressive lineup. Let's see. Let's make this one really studs and duds. Let's put Nunez in there. Let's put Daffy in there too. So with this kind of lineup, you can see, you can take one of those top tier options. A true studs and duds lineup, right, would be to probably take one more 6K option. So maybe that's, let's see, like a Tano Goya right there at -3. And then you finish it off. You polish off this lineup with somebody there in the 8K range. This kind of lineup, I'd imagine I have quite a bit of. In fact, a lot of times when I'm running my projections for DFS give the bottom tier guys a lot more credit than most people. Like the Peter Malnati's of the world are usually projected like close to some of those elite tier players because my projections are so based on birdie or better output, birdie or better percentage, aggressiveness, scoring, streaks, all that sort of fun stuff that really determines almost every showdown slate. And I feel like a lot of people out there do their showdown projections just based on overall talent level, which I think for a 4-round contest is probably the better way to go about it, right? Modeling for a golf course like I do for a lot of those main slates. But when you're looking at just an 18-hole sample size, you got to be looking at the aggressive players, the guys that, go out there, can make 5, 6 birdies in a round. And a lot of those lower tier players, right, despite being very inconsistent, right, those scrubs can make those 5, 6 birdies. So yes, Eric, great question. Absolutely. Already answered that, Mark. Yep. We'll get to your question there, Sammy, when we go over there to the prop side. So don't worry there. And Jimmy says, "What's up, bro? Let's smash tomorrow." Completely agree. So with that being said, we're going to get to props here in a minute. Let's finish this off with a look at a GPP lineup. So unlike what we're actually, we just went over a few things there. Let's look at the just cash plays to begin. So like the, top end guys that you should be playing in a 50-50 kind of contest. You want to play Shane Lowry or Chris Kirk, maybe both of them over here for cash. I would say the one that I would prefer would probably be a Shane Lowry. I think that taking Lowry and a Kirk in the same lineup, it's just maybe a little bit too expensive for a cash lineup. So let's start here with Shane Lowry. We can add Chris Kirk if we need to at the end. But as per usual with a Sunday showdown, you want to jam in guys at the top of the board. So Eric Cole, another must play when it comes to your cash lineup. Justin Suh, I would say Ben Taylor would almost be another must play. And hey, even Benny Ann here. So because we're not taking Shane Lowry and Chris Kirk up top, I mean, if you don't like Lowry tomorrow, let's say that you like Chris Kirk a little bit more, then take Chris Kirk, right? Doesn't matter, right? Just take your favorite guy up top, mix in some of these mid-tier options, and round it off with somebody that you can afford up top, right? Whether that's a Tyler Duncan, Ben Martin, you name it up there. The cash lineups here for Sunday are straightforward and not hard to build at all. In fact, if you were to have taken that lineup and then added in like Tyler Duncan up top, you're probably going to duplicate yourself with like 30% of the field. It's just, a real easy spot to land on. I would say the only real decision that you're making and kind of where you're going to win your cash lineup, right, is whether you take a Shane Lowry or a Chris Kirk, or if you take both, right? And if you try to take both of them in a cash lineup, you can see it puts you down to 7,200. You're not nearly as able to fit in some of these 8K options. So let's see here. Let's put Ben Taylor in this lineup. Let's put, Ben Martin in here. You're down to $7,000, right? Like trying to fit in a Benny Ann screws you, right? You can't even make a lineup at that point. So there is certainly opportunity cost involved with getting to both of those top tier options. So perhaps pick your favorite, right, out of a Sanjay and Chris Kirk and jam in some of those middle tier chalky options. In terms of a GPP lineup, I'm thinking completely different, right? I'm looking for players that can make 6, 7 birdies, and I don't want them to be highly owned. So a Sun GM up top is a natural resting spot, right? Going to be sub 20% in some contests. I would imagine probably closer to like 25% in some of those single entries. And for the rest of your lineup, if you want to be a little bit more chalky, you can, right? So if I want to take a Sepp Straka as my second man in, I'm more than okay with it, even though he's getting ownership, because I'm not mixing him in with a 40% Lowry, right? Or a 40% owned Chris Kirk there. In terms of your 8K options, I mentioned Ben Griffin before as one of my favorite plays on the slate. He's still getting some ownership, but it's not a problem when you're mixing him in with, some sort of pivot up there in the 10K range. So this is just the kind of things that, I would recommend that you consider when you're going out there and building lineups. But with 71.6 remaining per player, a Batia, right? Another guy going off early that I really like tomorrow. Let's see, like Harry Hall even, or Pearson Cootie, like all of these kind of guys that are going off in the first half of tee times, just round out this kind of lineup and you're going to have no issues, differentiating yourself, right? Not duplicating yourself, but also getting your leverage to the field. So that's what I would say from the Showdown side over there for some of your GPP contests. Let's see if there's any questions. And if not, we're going to get into the props. So if you've been waiting for those, we're going to get into those here in a minute. Video Game says back to Bobby Schoen. So let's take a look at the shots gained. So the reason we got to him yesterday, and I believe you're the one who pointed him out, which thank you, by the way, ended up working out pretty well. Let's see, what is he even par at this point? Or no, he played a lot better, didn't he? Just Control F. It's going to make our live a lot easier. Why is it not highlighting him here? Where's Robbie? There he is. That's right, up there in 20th place. Most importantly, did he get it done with the ball striking? And he did. Love it, right? Gained the most strokes off the tee here in round 3. Gained over 2 strokes on approach. Absolutely. Yes. I will be getting back to Bobby Sheldon If the ball striking is going to be there, it has been for pretty much all 3 days. You're the one who brought him up yesterday, right after he gained 3 strokes on approach. Day one was a little bit scratchy, but you're spot on. Yes. If you're going to take anybody here -4 or better, Davis Riley is somebody that I'm taking a chance on. It's because of the kind of player that he is, right? Look at this, round 3, gained 3 strokes approach, right? If you're going to try and tail a good performance, don't tail, a top end putting performance, which I think for Kramer Hickok is what he did. Let me double check this. No, he didn't actually. Take that back, but it's fine. Ryan Brehm, he almost certainly did it with the putting today. Yeah, right. Gained the most strokes putting of anyone in the field, gained 3 strokes putting. I'd be a lot more hesitant to tail Ryan Brehm after they good round, as opposed to somebody like a Kramer Hickok or Davis Riley, or even a Robbie Shellin, like you mentioned, that got it done with the ball striking. So certainly agree with you there. Alrighty, let's hop into props. So let's go ahead, refresh the screen here. Make sure we get all of these props on the screen. Alrighty, let's go over here in Underdog 2. Let's see if they have the props up. Pick let's bring up PGA. So they do. Okay, sweet. So we'll go over both sites. Again, if you have any questions about like birdie or better matchups, feel free to talk through them. But the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go category by category on every site. So we'll start with strokes on Prize Picks. We'll go through each board, try and make maybe like a 4 person card, and then hop over to Underdog and do the same thing. So let's get this. Welcome on in if you're just joining in a chat. Seems like every time I bring up the Prize Picks board, a bunch of people flood into the chat. So welcome in if you guys are just getting here. In terms of the weather, we'll do a quick little sneak peek at that before we hop into the board. It's looking just like it did today, right? Low winds, temperatures in the 80s, sunny skies throughout the entire day. So in terms of your golf conditions, pretty much perfect. The one thing to note is that they're calling between, let's say, like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time, pretty much no winds at all. They're calling for like a slack tide when it comes to those wind conditions, which is just going to even more so make it more perfect for going out there and making birdies. So let's bring up the Prize Picks board now, knowing that the weather is going to be solid. And you can see it seems like they've adjusted for it, right? So yesterday, Sungjae Im was at 69 strokes, right? Same thing with Shane Lowry. Now both of them are at 68.5. Looks like the rest of the board was also bumped down, right? Aaron Wise was at 70 strokes. Sepp Straka was even at 70.5. So Prize Picks, kind of like Underdog yesterday, looks like they're being a little bit more favorable toward these players. Like even Patrick Harrington, right, was 72.5 strokes yesterday, and now he's there at 71. Webb Simpson, right, going from 71.5 strokes down to 70 strokes. I'd have to think that this is now becoming like fade central. Yesterday, we were all about some of the unders, right? We took the over on Horschel, he smashed. We took the under on Wise, he ended up pushing there. I was willing to get to those kind of plays, but now that they're pricing the board up, not so much. I mean, Wise at 4 birdies, you'd have to think like that for an under, right? Like getting to 5 birdies on this golf course, it's not a ceiling performance, but it's certainly a better than average performance for somebody like an Aaron Wise. So we'll track that. What's his strokes at, right? 69 strokes. He's been in relatively bad form. I know he's more than capable of going off, but maybe we get on the other side of Wise this time. So let me go ahead and put that in there. Let's look at the rest of the birdie board. 3.5 for some of the top tier players. I would want to get to the over on some of those guys. The issue is they're going off late. So I think if anything, you go back to a Sungjae. I took his 3.5 over today. He only made 2 birdies. But again, he lost over 2 strokes putting today. Was, I believe, like 3rd from last when it comes to your shots gained putting metrics. He gained off the tee. He gained off on approach, just like he was able to do there on Thursday when he was able to take it to, I believe, like 3 under par. The difference here has to be you just got to get the putter working, right? Whether it's even just putting to a neutral, going out there making 4 or 5 birdies, let alone if he goes out there and gains to the field with the flat stick, where he might be making closer to like 6, 7 birdies on the day. So let's put those 2 in there for now. Aaron Wise, he is going to go off early in some of the best conditions that you have, but he's been dog shit to this point. Like day 1, he made a bunch of birdies, but he still only shot -1. Like, let's not kid ourselves, right? He holed out for an eagle, which is like one of the main reasons he even got to that score to begin with. And speaking of whole out eagles, I'm glad I reminded myself here. There was one today that was especially hurtful for the prop side that I saw in person. So We saw the whole out eagle from Justin Saw, which was unfortunate. It was about as tilting as it gets. He holed out from about 150 yards, which was the key decider on him going under strokes. I had his over 70.5 on underdog. That was the main prop that I took. He was at 71 on prize picks. So if he wouldn't have holed out, he would have ended up pushing that line. But on underdog, if he even hits it to 1 inch, right? And as the easiest tap in human history, he still hits the over, right? And he's a green over there, underdog. He freaking holed out for eagle from 150 yards. I saw it in person. I literally screamed. I didn't scream it. Sorry. I said it just kind of loudly under my breath. Fuck's sake, because it was like one of the more tilting things that I've seen. And a few people gave me the side eye. So that was unfortunate to see. But yeah, that kind of, bad luck, it's not going to last long. And honestly, with that prop there, that's exactly what that was. Like for a guy to go out there and hole out for eagle, and for that to be the reason that he ended up going over, or under strokes, I should say, just ridiculous. That was not a fun one for sure. What's going on, Sack? Love that Sack is back. He's one of the legends down there in the Discord and in the Patreon. So love to see it, man. You were talking about a wind shift earlier, change of direction. Yes. So just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, every wind site right around midday, it's going to change direction. So that's what I was mentioning when I was mentioning like a slack wind. It's kind of like a slack tide. So if you're familiar with the ocean, how it works with tides, for about a half an hour to an hour in between high and low tide, there's no movement in the water. Usually the waves really die down, and like over there at Pebble Beach, you'll see that whenever this happens. The Stillwater Cove, which from time to time can be really choppy during the event, goes completely still. And that's what you're getting here at midday. I'm not a weather person, right? I'm not a meteorologist, right? So I couldn't tell you why the winds are going to change direction midday, but they are. And when that happens, you can see the winds die down in one direction, go down to right around zero, right? Non-existent. And then they kick up back in the other direction, right? So it's almost like the winds that are going to start coming the other way are slowing down the winds, right? Putting them to zero, and then they're overtaking the winds, right? And then going the other way. That's the way that I see it, right? That's the way that I imagine that this works. I'm sure there's super complicated reasons for why this ends up happening, but yeah, you're spot on. There's going to be a little bit of a change of direction when it comes to wind, which I don't know. If you're looking at like single hole props, maybe you're able to take advantage of that there on like a prize picks. But when we're looking at our analysis, I don't know. They're all starting on hole number 1, right? It's not like there's going to be guys starting on holes number 1 in 10 that you might be able to try and target guys that are starting on 1-9 versus the other. So probably not a huge impact on the slate when it's all said and done. Kyle says, thoughts on Lowry and Sepp for birdies or better? So yeah, one of those top end guys like a Lowry, Sepp's there at 3.5 as well. You have to like the guys that are in form. The only part that it makes me slightly, worried would be the conditions, right? We've seen every day that the guys in the afternoon are playing a course that's about a stroke more difficult. Now, today it was about a 0.8 shot difference, but yesterday it was 1.8. Day one, it was 1.2 shots. So that's the worry, right? Is that they're playing greens that are going to be slightly firmer than some of the other players, greens that are going to be slightly faster than some of the other players. So does that trip them up? And, the likely answer is no, right? They're guys that are in form that have covered this line. I believe in Lowry's case in 2 out of 3 rounds. I know in Sepp's case in 2 out of 3 rounds. So you have to like that aspect of it, but you have to worry about the conditions too. So personally, I'm probably fading those 2 props, Kyle. I'm not taking the over or the under there, but I completely understand the thought process, right? They're some of the best players in the field when it comes to form. Let's look at the bottom end range. So we've got a few guys at 3. The earlier the tee time, the better. Akshay at 3.5. Now, I like him to have a good day tomorrow, right? But he's one of the lower tier players. Like he's along the lines of like a Bizanehout at best, probably even worse than Bizanehout when it comes to your talent level. And just because he's going off at 8 a.m. doesn't mean that he has to be at an entire 0.5 higher birdies. So this is probably a prop that I'm fading, but if anything, I'd probably lean on the under there. Something I'm going to keep out of my card for right now. Over here on strokes, let's look at the bottom tier players like Batia at 70 strokes. Even if he goes out there and he makes 4 birdies tomorrow, likely probably going to make closer to like 2-3 birdies. He's going to mix in a few bogeys. He's a young, inexperienced player, not the most accurate player off the tee. Today, lost strokes on all 4 shots gained categories. So there are a few fades to be had down low, I'd say. I'd probably avoid Harrington. He really likes his course. He's won here twice. Justin Suh, they have it 70 strokes. I liked the fade yesterday at 71 strokes. I'd probably like him here again. He would have pushed this number today. Now has Sunday pressure on his mind, right? So it's not even Saturday for him. He's going to be feeling it even more, and even more difficult conditions too when it comes to the pin locations. So let's go ahead and put the over there just for this card. And to round this out, we're going to find one more positive stance because we want to make this a boosted payout card. So let's go ahead, find one more positive. Let's look at, oh, they added greens regulation. Okay. And they have everyone way higher. See, I like unders here. Like today, greens and regulation were hit, but they weren't hit at a rate that was super high. There was like 11.5 the last time I checked. These are some of the better iron players, right? So you'd project them slightly higher than the field. Yeah, so maybe I avoid these. Like Akshay seems about right. It's good that they offered them at least. I wish they'd offer more than 6 players, though, right? Give us a little bit more options to choose from. I'm not adding this for a reason I'm adding it. I just want to look at the payout. Okay, so we still get the boosted payout. Let's look at the matchup board. Maybe there's an over here we can take that I'm okay with. Today we played the Willett versus Will Gordon prop. They ended up pushing, which isn't ideal, but it's a push as a push, right? It's not hurting us too much. Let's see. Poston versus Vegas. Lots of props across the board right now. Minwoo Lee, actually, I like quite a bit. He's going off at a similar tee time to Aaron Wise, but of course, we already have the Aaron Wise prop in there, so we can't add that. Gerard versus Saw. It's 2 shitters at the top of the board. That's an interesting one. Yeah, these birdie are better matchups. I would have to say just aren't my favorite. This Kirk versus Percy one, slightly intriguing, right? Based on how Chris Kirk has played to this point, but he's also got a huge lead, right? Isn't incentivized to go out there and play to really the full aggressiveness that we're used to seeing. So, we're gonna find a prop here to add on stream. I promise you guys. We'll want to make sure it's a solid one. I don't want to force anything in here. Let's look at strokes. You can consider like a Sanjay for under strokes, but I like his over birdies better. So let's try and find someone else. This is tough. I mean, if they had Akshay, truth be told, right? If Akshay was at 3 birdies or better, I'd be taking his over, right? But I think if anything, you'd want to take his under at that point. That only gives you a 10x payout, though. And again, I want to give you guys a little bit of a boosted payout structure here. So let's find an over for you. Christian Bezainhout, I think he projects for right about 3 birdies. So let's probably stay away from that one. Maybe it is a matchup that will end up going to. So I know I didn't love the matchups here, but there are still a few, like I said, that I thought you can lean on. We do need it to be an over, though. Can't be an under, right? So I know that Minwoo Lee versus Aaron Wise was slightly intriguing, but we can't take that one just based on direction. I do like Albertson over a Jeff Ogilvy, but unfortunately that would be an under too. So we can't take that one. I mean, even this Kevin Tway versus JB Holmes, like I like the Kevin Tway side of that, but that's an under. And if we take the under there, you can see you're only getting the 10x payout. Whereas if we took the over, it's 12.5x. So that's kind of why I'm trying to force in this over here. Straka versus Kramer, both of them have been striking it well. So that's probably a little bit of a wash. This Moronk versus Horschel, extremely close matchup between the two. Yeah, this board over here in Prize Picks is a little bit of a tough scene. So we're going to keep it at these 3. I'm not going to force it in, guys, right? I'm not the type of guy to play props that I don't see out there. I'm going to run my projections. I'll be able to see the actual differentials between my projections and what the board looks like here in just a few. So I imagine right after we get off stream here, I'm running my write-up, doing my analysis. There'll be, a few more props that I'm getting to. Maybe it is a Lowry, right? Maybe it is a Sepp Straka up top that somebody mentioned before. Because again, I understand the play. I could see how my algorithm would agree with that. And if it does, I'll probably end up going with it. But based on what I'm seeing now, right, without those models in front of me, nothing that I want to go ahead and jam in. So let's go with those 3 props. A power play would be a 5x, so I have no issues with playing that. Going over here to underdog now, I want to see if they have Suh on the board. They had him yesterday. They have him at 70.5 strokes. That's interesting, right? They have him at 70.5, and now Prize Picks is the one with the low number at 70. Whereas over the last few days, right, it's been underdog, the one that's been pricing these guys a little bit lower. So there's been a bit of a reversal, it seems, between the two sites. Like even Bazane Hoot's lower, right? Taylor Pendrith is at 69 strokes. Now I know Pendrith isn't on the board, but he would likely be at something like 69 and a half, maybe even 70 strokes here on the Prize Picks board. So a little bit of a reversal. Maybe we're going to be taking a few unders over here on the Prize Pick side, and then sorry, I think I'm doing that wrong. Sorry, yeah, unders over here on the underdog side. Potentially a few overs there on Prize Picks. So kind of like the opposite of yesterday. It does look like almost all the par 3 strokes are at 12. So they have 12 on Lowry, 12 on Sungjae, but 12 and a half on almost everyone else. So like from an Eric Cole down, 12 and a half cumulative strokes, which is probably where everyone should be. But these guys up top, right, like a Lowry, a Kirk, and a Sungjae, I'd go right back to the fades there at 12 cumulative strokes. If you take a look at the scoring from today, let's go ahead and just put it to overall scoring averages. 5 played slightly under par. 7 played right to even par, but both 15 and 17 both played over. And with slightly harder pins for tomorrow, some of those Sunday nerves for these players, it's going to play over par once again, right? So maybe, rather than it playing, let's say like 0.31 strokes over par, maybe it's closer to the 0.5 over strokes par that we saw for, yesterday's round. And then the same thing over there for Thursday. So do like some of these par 3 strokes. I'm going to go ahead and just put Kirk in there for now. We're going to keep this, the card for par 3 strokes just to Kirk for now. Make sure I have the right prop in there. Let's look at Eric Cole's props. So Eric Cole, right towards the top of the board, I would say like a prime candidate to go out there and choke, probably for lack of a better word there on Sunday. So over 2.5 bogeys, kind of calling my name. The over on strokes, another prop that you can consider. Let's go ahead and take a look at his ball striking from today, because that's going to tell us a lot about where the weaknesses might be. So for round 3, he gained a bunch putting and he was okay with the ball striking. Whereas in rounds 1 and 2, it was the ball striking that carried him. So he's been a little bit inconsistent across the board, but he's still just like playing solid golf. So maybe you fade him for strokes. Maybe you just assume that he doesn't have that solid day. So let's go ahead and put the over 69.5 for now. And just for comparison's sake, yeah, somebody like Cole would probably be at like 69.5 or 70 strokes there. So I think it's a competitive line. Let's take a look at Justin Suh. So Justin Suh is at 70.5. Over here in underdog, right? It's almost at the point where like you'd want to take the under on Suh, right? Because he's over there at 70 on Prize Picks. But yeah, probably something I'm avoiding. The 3 birdie lines. Now I have to say these 3 birdie lines for a lot of the, let's say, lower tier players in this field, kind of catching my eye. Like a JT Poston, he's got that hot putter. Would not surprise me for him to go out there and make 3 birdies at the very worst push. They have Billy at 4 birdies. I mentioned with Aaron Wise, right? That's why we faded him over there in Prize Picks. Getting to 5 is going to be ridiculous tomorrow. So for as much as I hope that Billy Ho proves me wrong, right? Helps me cash it out, right? For him to get 5+ birdies is going to be asking a lot. So let's go ahead and put that one in there. And I just realized they have Shane Lowry at 67.5 strokes. You have to be taking the fade there. And that's an even better fade than this 4 birdies line because he's going to be mixing in plenty of bogeys too, particularly with some of those tough back 9 pins, the tougher conditions because he's going off, I believe, in the second to last group of the day. So let's go ahead and go with these 4 here for the stream. Again, I'll be running my projections, trying, to figure out some of the other pieces of value on the board. But this is what I'm looking at as of right now. Let's go ahead, catch up on chat, and we're going to hop on out of here afterwards because we got a prop write-up to do. I actually meeting a few buddies out here at a bar in about an hour and a half. So I got a lot to do and not a lot of time. So let's get this thing working. Thoughts on, yes, right, we already went over that. My bad, Kyle. Dzav says, thoughts on Seabez at 3 birdies. So yeah, I think he's got a lot of push potential. I wish that he was going off a little bit earlier than some of the other tee times. To this point, I want to look at the shots gained. So he's at 3 over there in Prize Picks, not on underdog. So make sure you're targeting him on the right site. Let's look at the shots gained. So played decently today, helped us out there for Showdown. And the ball striking, I have to imagine, was better. and it was, right? Gained both off the tee and on approach. Didn't do anything crazy with the putter, which is kind of what he's known for. He lost strokes putting in round 2, was a slight gainer in round 1. Yeah, I think that Bazane is probably worth a few looks. He's got room for improvement both with the ball striking and the putting, which I say, is a pretty solid thing. Do you play any rivals? I don't. So it's kind of like birdie or better matchups over there on Prize Picks. They tend to be some of the more random props that you can take, but just to go through it for you, let's go ahead and take a look at the board. So these are based on strokes, right? These aren't birdie or better matchups, but they're almost just as volatile as the birdie or better matchup counterparts. Let's see. I don't hate the Wise under Vegas. The reason why I would say for Wise under Vegas, it looked like Vegas might have been injured today. They were showing it on the ESPN Plus coverage. In fact, I didn't even get to see Vegas's round in person. So it was just what I was seeing there on the, live coverage hole by hole. He kept grabbing his shoulder. He kept, doing the little pitcher's motion with his left hand. And every shot that he hit was one-handed, like literally every single shot, whether it was off the tee or an approach. So if he's dealing with some kind of injury, again, he had shoulder surgery last year, then Aaron Wise, even with the shitty play, you'd probably have to take his under there. Let's see. Riley, right, under versus Hickok. Let's go ahead and let's take these other props out of here. You're making me a believer in these strokes because it looks like they just have some shitty matchups up. And again, these matchups, right, like they're volatile, but when you give me these talent gaps, like I might have to be a buyer. You might have just made me a believer in these, man. Let's see, like Straka versus Duncan. Like Straka's just like an objectively better player. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't force a bunch of these in, but like these three specifically, right? The Riley over Hickok, the Wise over Johnny Vegas, and the Straka over Tyler Duncan. It looked like pretty decent props to me. So yeah, I'll have to say I'll probably end up playing those here tonight. So good call on those for sure. Randy says you would take Kirk as an under, playing conservative to maintain his lead. So is the Kirk under for birdies are better or strokes? Because I could see the argument for either case there, to be frank with you. If you're talking about under for like birdies are better, right? He's not going to be super aggressive. I wish he was at 4 birdies, right? Because of that conservative nature. But if you're talking about for strokes, right, I could see that too. Him going out there, maybe being a little bit, safer, right? Not as aggressive. What's his strokes line? He's at 69 strokes, right? If you're going to take anything for his under here, it'd have to be over here on Prize Picks, right? Where they're pricing it a little bit higher than they're on Underdog. I don't know. I think that Chris Kirk, to be frank with you, is probably a pretty hard player to reject for tomorrow. He is a great course history guy, right? The recent form has been there, but anytime we've gone him in contention, I'd say over the last few years, at least when he's been like in the top 5 to start the round, it hasn't gone well. Where he's actually finished in the top 5, where he has those top 3 finishes, are typically when he's a chaser there on Sunday, where maybe he's in like that 5th through 10th position and has to go out there and be aggressive. So I don't know. I'm probably avoiding Kirk, to be honest. I'll probably just take his over for the, par 3 strokes. And if you were talking about for the par 3 strokes, I'm just realizing you might have said for that, the scoring average is going to be over par, right? So I think if anything, he's very likely to, push the 12 number if he's being conservative, let alone if he ends up making a mistake there on Sunday, hitting a water ball on one of those bear trap holes. So yeah, I don't know which prop you're talking about. I just gave you my thoughts on all of them just in case. But yeah, that's the thoughts there. But that's all I've got, boys. Going to go ahead, end the stream here. The Honda Classic was a blast. Tomorrow should be a blast out there too. Really looking forward to it. But next week at the API, and then after that at the Players, going to be there in person as well. In fact, for next week, I ended up having, we have a family timeshare, a few of them that we run. And we ended up trading one of them in so that I can go to the event next weekend. So I'm going to have some sort of condo a few miles away from the golf course, and potentially still figuring out the dates, might be able to be there for the Wednesday practice round. So kind of like we had for the Honda this week, might be able to give you guys a few little course insights out there from Bay Hill. And then at the Players, I already have my Airbnb booked. We're going to be there 2 days early. So I'll be there for the Tuesday round and the Wednesday practice round, bringing you guys all of that extra info. But like I said, Best of luck with all of your lineups. Before you're hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so you don't miss any of the content in the future. Best of luck with those DFS lineups. Best of luck with those props if you're going with them. And let's get this cash, fellas.